are going to find themselves in a world of oddity. Okay, hyper novelty is going to cause them a real problem, because within hyper novelty, we're going to have a situation here where the media is going to have to start defending the power elites against the charges from the population that they did all this shit deliberately. Okay, so that's going to be the problem for the media, is that they'll at first just dismiss it. Oh, you're crazy, right? You're a conspiracy theorist, that kind of thing. But there will be so many people, many of them with some level of stature, some level of major social pressure or presence, and these guys will be saying, no, these elites did it on purpose. It's not incompetency. It's a giant global takeover thing to kill off most of the humans. Now, all the woo people, we know this, right? We know the what the WEF is trying to do, and the Elohim worship cult and all of that, their depopulation agenda and all this shit. We're aware of this, but the normies are not, and the propagandists who are also aware of it and are participating are going to have to start defending the power elites. Now, here's the really interesting wrinkle. The media themselves will be called out as part of the deliberate process of depopulation and, the takeover of the planet, the Great Reset, all of that horseshit, right? And our global revolution that's happening in pushback, the apocalypse, the Great Awakening, is going to mean that these guys are going to be called out. They're going to have to defend the power elite. And then because of all of that also, they're going to be charged by people as being part of the problem and part of the plot, and they're going to have to defend themselves. And it's not going to go over very well. And they're going to, I don't know that they'll ever see how stupid and participatory they actually look by trying to defend themselves against these charges, but it's going to be that blatant. So it's going to be really funny, all of the, all the late night fucktard shows and, the Coming News Network and all of this kind of stuff, right? All of these guys are going to say, no, we weren't part of it. No one paid me to lie about COVID. No one paid me to lie about Epstein Island and all this other stuff.
Oh, okay.
Which, of course, is horseshit.
Was it 2? Thank you.
We know that they were indeed paid. That there was bakshish going on, right? So it's going to be really interesting that way. We've got major paradigm crumbling that's going to be happening over this summer, such that by the time we get to whatever the event is on the 15th and 16th of July or thereabouts, and it might be a series of events, might be a whole lot, I don't know. It's just massively building tension. It's like a building tension spike like I've never seen before. And so it's in a very short period of time. So there's something going on, at least linguistically. It doesn't necessarily mean that there's a manifestation in reality so much as it means that there's a shitload of language of a building tension nature that's going to be popping up. In any event, though, so by the time we get to this event, we will be deep into paradigm crumbles. And the paradigm is going to crumble just like a cookie, and it's going to be, for me, it's going to be really interesting to watch. Because I've been anticipating this since, since 63, right? When Kennedy was, when they had the fake Kennedy assassination. I'm with Jay Widener. That was a squib on the side of his head. And that is why people think that the driver turned around and shot him. Okay, it's because the blowout from the right side of his head, from the squib, looked like he had been shot on the left side of his head, and it blew out. But if you look at the autopsy report, the right side of his skull was still intact. So there was no shot from the left that took out the right side of the skull. Anyway, though, So our paradigm is going to be crumbling here, and this paradigm is going to totally undo NASA and the military and all of these people relative to UFOs. Okay, so you know, the fake moon landings and all of that kind of shit, right? So we're going to go back in history in part of our global revolution over these next 10 years or more. It's a 25-year process that we're in, okay? I won't go into the math, but it's part of the yugas, and the overlap from one yuga to the next is the emotional reaction to the energies from space change as those energies from space change, as from galactic center. And so we're in a very particular 25-year period of time in which we will have a chaos, an absolute massive chaos as hypernovelty takes over, authority dies, and we have to reconstitute, have to reshape all of our social order, including who we trust and where we place our trust for, quote, authority, right? And so we're gonna lose all of it. We're gonna see the reduction of of NASA and all these people to, they're already a laughing stock, but they'll be reduced to having to defend themselves against criminal charges and stuff, right? It's going to get really interesting. I'm expecting that we will see people sue the movie studios for having trannies in their movies and not telling people. And they'll sue them under truth in advertising laws because they are attempting to be deceptive, to just like the music industry, right? They are attempting to deceive you by telling you that this Taylor dude is a female. And so all of these male to female trannies will be coming on out, and they're going to have to go back to the 1930s. They will be sued for because they can establish a pattern going back to the 1930s of deliberate deception. Now, we know it was a Jewish thing, right? We know that Hollywood was taken over by the Elohim worship cult, and this Jewish thing of all of the transgenders and 8 genders and all of this kind of shit was intruded into our social order, and they snuck it in a deceptive manner, and they'll be sued. Some attorneys are going to make a fucking fortune off of this, but they're also going to become some of the most famous people on the planet as they proceed with this lawsuit that is going to just really fuck over the normies' heads. This thing is just like, it's pretty big. I don't know how long it'll take for it to develop, but it's in the data sets. So there's that. We're going to be having lots of confrontation. I expect that there will be let's say direct action, citizen direct action in regard to the lies coming out of government and the media, because we're just not taking it anymore. So it's kind of like we're coming into a period of time when we will have social justice, right? Street justice. And then there will be law. And there's no political will to enforce law up to the point of justice within the communist takeover of our institutions. This is a very Maoist long march through the institutions kind of thing that's going on. There's no political will to have justice come from prosecution. So, Soros paid for this. George Soros paid for all these prosecutors to get into positions where they don't prosecute in order to upend our social order. This is a known plan. Anyway, so we're coming up to the point where the street justice is going to cause the propagandists to react, because the street justice is going to go to the point where there will be the guilty will be executed on the street, and no one's going to say shit about it. And then they may try and prosecute those who are doing the execution and are participating in the street justice, but then there will be riots about that will totally destroy, like, police stations and stuff, right? So, some kid's going to be raped by a African invader or Muslim invader here in the U.S., likely in the Northeast. This rape will be caught on security cams because it'll happen out in public on the street kind of thing. And people will react. That criminal, that rapist, that pedophile, that human trafficker kind of abuser person will end up dying as a result of his crime in the street, in street justice. And then later on, like maybe a couple of days later, the cops will use security cams at the direction of the commies that control the area. And then the Communist Authority will go and try and arrest the people. They'll succeed in arresting at least one individual that was participatory in the street justice. And this is going to incite such a blowback on the authority figures that you will have mobs surround a police station in one of these cities. Maybe it'll be like Pittsburgh, something like that. It's in the Northeast somewhere. And the mobs are going to be local Americans, right? Not invaders or any of that. The invaders are going to be really pissed that the guy got killed in the street, but there's going to be more than that, because there's going to be other invaders that attempt to aid the pedophile rapist, and they're going to get the shit kicked out of them too. So it's going to be a real melee. And then a few days later, the authorities are going to come on in and try and make this into a big propaganda stink on behalf of their agenda. And it's not going to work out the way they think, because after they arrest this guy, the neighborhood, so to speak, is just going to turn on the law enforcement people. They're going to surround the building. There will be they'll be declaring riot. They'll probably have to try and bring in cops from outside. Those will be thwarted. It's going to be like pretty much a day-long confrontation. And at the end of that day, the person that was arrested, he's out. And the police are in disarray. Their stuff is all destroyed. I mean, cop cars burned, the station burned down, all of that kind of shit. And so that's one of the temporal markers we've got coming. And it marks a particular elevation in dynamic activity relative to the global revolution. And this will be coincident to some degree. So within the same month, maybe, as we start getting the populace accusing all of the, so we're accusing the elites of being pedophiles now, right? And some of the woo people were out there saying, Fauci knew, he engineered it, they've been planning it for 200 fucking years, they got Fauci to work on it over 40 fucking years ago, developing these bioweapons, and he was the highest paid civil servant, and he didn't serve any of us within our government, yada, 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 right? And so we're going to get people saying that Fauci was, he is a murderer, and he needs to be tried and executed. And then the populace, or the mainstream media, is going to try and defend Fauci and all of his ilk, all these other fuckers too, going to try and defend them from the mobs, from the attacks online. And in that process, they themselves will be attacked. How can you defend this slime? You're part of it. You were bribed, blah, blah, blah. So you're going to see a lot of resignations, lots and lots and lots of resignations out of the media, because these people are stupid. They're hired because they are stupid, malleable, and criminal themselves. But some of them, even though they're stupid, they will get the, they'll get the wind up, right? And they'll smell what's coming, and they will resign rather than be lynched in the street, because that's coming. So it's going to be just a tremendous global revolution, and a tremendous American Revolution 2.0. We're in those days now, right? So you've got people like Bo Polney out there using the word biblical. And this biblical is like, it's a watered down, don't mean shit kind of stuff. He's talking Old Testament, Jubi, let's worship the Jews calendar, let's worship the Jews because they're lying and telling us that they were chosen by God and that they're superior and they have Loxism, which means that they're above everybody else, and they want to kill all the other people on the planet. And you stupid goys, you don't know they were. We're telling you that as Jews that we were chosen by God.
Okay, well, I think we can get going. That was Cliff High in one of his recent audio rants. The thing I like about Cliff High is that he's a pretty smart guy. Now, you have to consider that he himself says he's a paranoid schizophrenic. So he automatically, if you can't prove it to him, he doesn't believe it. So that's fine. As long as you understand that and keep that into context with everything he says, then, I mean, he's actually a pretty smart guy and pretty interesting. And he's got his web bot that he uses to scrape the internet. And that's what he was talking about earlier, is some stuff that he's expecting to happen. This audio was done on the 11th of April. So he's expecting that stuff to happen this year for sure, where people start rising up, and since we can't expect the courts to do justice, then it'll be street justice, and that's essentially what he's talking about. Is and the cops, I've even in Texas, the cops, you always hear the cops saying that they're not going to interfere with the people. And so if the people come out in mass, the cops might be there watching, but that'll be about it. So anyway, so let's get moving on this. This is part 2 of the Great Reset. We've got about another 130 slides to go through, or no, we got about another 60 slides. And then if we have time, we'll talk about criminal complaints a little bit, and look at some more criminal complaints that I do. But anyway, so let's get going on this. So we're talking about the Great Reset, right? And we're talking about how these monsters, remember, 107 calls them monsters, and I think that that's exactly what they are. I think he nails it there. They're just monsters, and they're trying to set it up so we fight amongst each other, and then they come in and pick up the pieces and take over the world. So, but it's not working out too well for them. People are pretty, and that's the thing. They say that when everybody was armed back in the days, in colonial days, right? Everybody was required to be armed. They didn't have any trouble with, mass murderers and any of that stuff. You know what I mean? They just, everybody was armed. They say that armed society is polite society. You don't want to get in a fucking gunfight with somebody, and so you're going to be respectful to the guy. Anyways, but these Satanists, these monsters, promote their own agenda with the objective of they want to take away your arms so you don't have the means to defend yourself. Anyways, don't get me going. So it's about these monsters and what their agenda is. And so, and again, at the end of the day, when the people convene their common law courts, then, and we can do anything that we want. Okay. We're the people. We decide what truth and justice is. You know what I mean? And, so what he described there is the cops trying to go after somebody, and the cops didn't do too well, according to what he saw in his data sets, where of course this is again in his data sets, and so how it all plays out is yet to be seen. But he said that he saw it in his data sets in the Northeast somewhere. There's going to be some sort of a rape or something like that, and then the local people are going to take matters into their own hands, and then the police are going to go after the perpetrators, and that's not going to work out too well for the cops. And they're all military police. They got no business getting mixed up with the people, and they forget who they are. So what is called proclaiming martial law is no law at all, but merely for the sake of public safety in circumstances of great emergency, setting aside all law and acting under military power. And they can only get away with that when the people are asleep at the wheel. That's why they have to pass statutes for common law offenses. That's why all statutes are edicts under martial law, and that's actually found in the Libra Code. We can't even begin to count the number of times judges, lawyers, and statesmen have said there isn't any common law anymore. It's been replaced by statutes. They'd be more truthful if they said there isn't any common law anymore. It's been replaced by martial law. And that's actually found in the cause and necessities for taking up arms. There's no common law of the United States as contradistinguished from individual states, and courts of the United States, instead of administering common law of any particular system, conform to law of the states where they are situated. But that's found in the cause and necessities for taking up arms. It says that martial law supersedes and replaces common law. There's no common law offenses against the United States, only those acts which Congress has forbidden with penalties for disobedience of its command or crimes. And most of the states have something saying that common law is abolished, but what that's saying is in that corporation, there's no common law. Because common law is still there. It's in our common law juries, and we, the people, are the ones that decide what that is. Under Texas law, no act or omission is a crime unless made so by statute. The legislature may create an offense and in the same enactment provide exceptions to its application. And again, that's in the corporation. And there's actually Robert Fox. I don't know if we were remember talking about Robert Fox? We talked about Robert Fox. He was a guy who, he's passed away now, but he used to live in Texas. There's actually a Supreme Court case, Fox versus United States. And I wonder if we can pull that up. Let's see. Yeah, it's too common of a name. Anyway, so I'm not going to bother. But anyways, he would fight cases based on the fact that when Congress passes a law, like for example, (18 U.S.C. 1115) misconduct or neglect of ship officers. Okay, and so if Congress has to have implementing regulations, if they want to charge you under that, they have to have implementing regulations, and if they don't, then they can't enforce it. The only time Congress can actually say in the act that they pass that they don't have to make implementing regulations, and then they can enforce it. But otherwise, they have to make implementing regulations. And so then you think about it. If they have to make implementing regulations, then 99% of these statutes that are passed by Congress are only effective for government employees. because the regulations only apply to government employees. You see what I'm saying? And so so there was a guy that came to our meeting that we have, our weekly Tuesday meeting, and he was talking about that. He was like a protege of Robert Fox, and he had actually brought an action because Trump was charged under an act that had no implementing regulations, and so they couldn't charge him under that act. And so he had done an amicus curiae, right, which is a friend of the court, to the D.C. Court of Appeals, and to bring up that issue on behalf of Trump. And what happened is they dismissed it because there was no rules for them to accept a amicus curiae, which they're saying the same thing. There's a rules of regulation, right? They had no rules saying they could accept an amicus curiae. That was a D.C. Court of Appeals. That was quite interesting. So he actually gave me his brief, his word file, so I'd have his arguments and stuff. It's quite interesting. So the point is, that's all for the corporations. That's all for the government, is really who that's for, and their corporations. But they're going to go ahead and assault you with it. And so they assault you with that minor estate under the Commerce Clause. And that's the argument, is you accuse them of attempted murder, you accuse them of involuntary servitude, you accuse them of all sorts of felonies that only a man or woman, that they can only do against a man or a woman, and accuse them of bringing the District of Columbia outside of 10 Mile Square in violation of Article 1, Section 8, Clause 17. Under a military dictatorship, there is no law, which is why they're required to pass statutes or edicts for common law crimes like murder and assault. This creates civil law, which creates a democracy. Under a military dictatorship, you have a democracy. Democracy is international law. I have exclusive content available on HowTube. It's $9.99 a month for the videos, plus unlimited email consultations. But I'm not a liar. Well, I'm an attorney. No, I'm a liar. But I can tell you what I would do under certain circumstances and where to find the forms. The only power that these New World Order Satanists have over us is through fraud and deception, and my agenda is to expose it for all our benefit, but I cannot fight all the battles. Okay, so let's get rid of this Patreon. I went and closed my Patreon down. So, yeah. Back here. Some of my exclusive content is an Arlington private information share, which is 7 videos by itself. Land deed training, estoppel certificates training, foreclosure estoppel certificates training, corporate denial training, toll roads notice and demand training, invoice training, notice of void judgment training, revocation of signatures training, third-party witness training, federal habeas corpus training. I've got a couple or 3 for the land deed training. The toll road notice and demand training is, I basically set it up so that I go on the toll roads in the DFW area and they don't send me bills or anything. And so if you lay the proper foundation and do the right things, what I did, quite frankly, is I sent them the notice and demand, and then I did the Form 1020 and with the chief counsel and put them into default. And then I filed a bar grievance against their chief counsel, and then everything went silent. I go on the toll roads all the time down there, and they don't even send me bills. Now, I can tell you that I go on the toll road in Austin, and I haven't, that's a different toll road authority, but it's the same billing company. and it's a company in Germany. Anyways, it's the same billing company, and they send me a bill. So I know that when I travel on the Fort Worth toll roads, they're scanning my plate, but they're just not sending me a bill. You see what I'm saying? So it works, let me tell you. So revocation of voter registration, criminal complaint training. I've got like 3 videos up there. We did one at the NorthEast Private Information Share. We talked a little bit about that on, I think it was on Friday. And so we'll talk a little bit more about that today if we get time. I have lawsuit training. I've got 1 video on that. I need to do more. Other training requests, I'm open to other training requests, but it's got to be something to do with the law. It's got to be something I haven't already done. And it's got to be something that is an area of law that I want to help people with. For example, I'm not interested in trying to capture that minor estate. I have no idea how. I think that that's satanic, and I'm not interested in doing it, and I wouldn't recommend anybody else do it. So I don't do anything. I mean, I do stuff under the Uniform Commercial Code because I'm forced to be in that system under certain circumstances. So I can tell you how you can, like the Form 1020, okay, is really that's under that system, and so you're using law against these pirates. So I can do some of the stuff under there, but I'm not interested in capturing that minor estate. They're nothing but a bunch of thieves and pirates, and I don't care what they do with the fake money in there. It's fake money, and I really think that it's satanic. It's diabolically evil, and they admitted it. If you read that Edward Mandel House, Colonel House, what he said about it, he said it's a fraud, and it is. It's a lie, and that's satanic by its nature. And so I'm not interested in participating in it, and I do everything I can to break it off in their ass. So I'm not going to do any videos or training on how to do that. There's lots of, you got to understand that there's lots of disinformation, lots of people peddling their unproven theories, and if you want to get mixed up in that, then knock yourself out. I'm not going to get mixed up in that. Some of my stuff that I've done because I went and got mixed up in those unproven theories, and they just, ignore it. That's the reason I was at the very beginning. I went and talked about some criminal complaints I get against credit card companies because I'm going to get them to discharge that debt. I did the Form 1020, but I'd previously done an unproven theory that didn't work, and that they canceled the card and they still wanted their fake money. So anyways, don't get me going. The NorthEast Private Information Share videos are going to be up there. All forms, files, and other instructions are available for free in my 2 private groups at Yahoo and Google. All exclusive content's on my website, and you can actually, it's on HowTube. And you can buy a subscription there, and I have no control over HowTube. You cannot send me money and expect me to sign you up on HowTube, because I can't. So you got to do it on HowTube. Everything else you can send me money for. If you want to buy my DVDs or other things, you can send me money for. Matter of fact, somebody was supposed to come today, and they were supposed to text me, and I haven't received anything. I guess they're not coming. Anyways. So, yeah. And my HowTube is Sovereignty International. So they've been telling people for decades that we're in a democracy. Do you think it's an accident? And he causeth all, both small and great, rich and poor, free and bond, to receive a mark in their right hand or in their foreheads, and that no man might buy or sell, save he had the mark, or the name of the beast, or the number of his name. Here is wisdom. Let him that hath understanding count the number of the beast, for it is the number of a man, and his number is 666. That's Revelations 13:16-18. Some people say that Bitcoin is the mark of the beast, or will become the mark of the beast. The mark of the beast could be related to a cryptocurrency. I think it's going to be more related to like a central bank digital currency, which is government issued. Yes.
I've heard from more than one source, which I happen to think there's credibility. The mark of the beast, based on the original scrolls that they found, is actually the ISIS Arabic that's on their foreheads.
Oh, really?
Yeah, because what happened was a guy who grew up, a white guy that grew up in Arabia, was reading it, and when it gets to that number 666, it's not Greek, it's actually Arabic.
Wow.
That's what he said. And I've heard more than one person confirm it who are, who study Greek and are so that is just for the, the good of the order.
Well, that's very interesting. I've always thought, it's been my opinion, like it talks about the Battle of Armageddon and all of that stuff going on, right? I've always thought, like, it doesn't really talk about anything about North America. It talks about the kings of the East. It talks about, and if you read, it talks about from the north, okay, and north of Israel is Turkey.
Yep.
It talks about, stuff that's going on over there in that part of the world. I've always thought that America wouldn't be involved in that, and I think that, I guess we'll see, but I think that we're about to take our country back, and we're not going to be involved in it, and there's probably going to be a lot of chaos and turmoil here while we get things sorted out, and so that'll be another reason why we won't be involved in it. You know what I mean? And we'll be dealing with our own issues, and but that's all going to be. So, anyways, yes.
The Bible says that the kingdom of the north will defeat the kingdom of the south,
Right.
and the kingdom of the east will defeat the kingdom of the west. And I feel that we are part of the west, since most of our past is people came from England, France, Germany, from the west, Hungary, Italy.
Yeah.
They're definitely not the east. Now, there's more Westerners here than Easterners.
Well, we are considered the West,
Yeah.
but there's a lot of, what part of the West, and there's a lot of, I guess we'll see,
They say the Northwest Passage, remember? Northwest.
Well, I've heard of the Northwest
That's
Passage.
been thousands of years they talked about
That's,
that.
well, more like hundreds.
Well, before the Bacons, they were looking for the Northwest Passage. That's before 1,000.
Well, that's maybe 1,000 then. Still not thousands. It's maybe 1,000, but
1,001.
anyways, some people say that Bitcoin is the mark of the beast, or will become the mark of the beast. I think it's more like the central bank digital currency. The mark of the beast could be related to a cryptocurrency. I think it's going to be more like the central bank digital currency. The thing I like about Bitcoin is that they have no control over it. The weakness that I see is that as long as we have power, we're going to have it. Power is so widespread that it's going to be hard to, but it could happen, if there was like a solar flare. I don't know how many people have heard of the Carrington event. That was a solar flare in the 1870s where set telegraph stations on fire. And so if you think about it, I mean, that basically, the energy from the sun it's not just sunlight. Obviously, it was energy. It was static energy that came down so close to the surface of the earth, it was hitting the only thing at the time that conducted electricity, which was telegraph wires, and sparking onto anything nearby that was flammable, which is telegraph stations, and setting them on fire. Sparking with such ferocity was setting them on fire. And so, if that happened today, that would be like major problem. But even if that happened today, it would take out the power grids on one side of the planet. The other side of the planet would be just fine. So still, there's the Bitcoin would still be there, because Bitcoin is done with millions of miners, computers that are mining Bitcoin. And yes, it'd take out a bunch on this side of the planet, or whatever side of the planet it happens to be on, but the other side of the planet would be just fine. And, all you flat earthers, well, I think that you're confused. So, they had it was the D-ring of the Pentagon, they say, is what spread around the flat earther misinformation. And, if you remember back in the Dark Ages, if you disagreed with the Roman cult about the earth being flat, they killed you. And now we got a bunch of people that want to go back to Roman cult days, I guess, Anyways, I think the mark of the beast has more to do with a social security number, a vaccination record that Bill Gates talks about. Cliff High is saying that he figures Bill Gates is going to get assassinated this year. So I as much as I dislike the guy, I'd rather see him get his neck stretched. If he gets assassinated, he's going to be some sort of hero to somebody. If he gets his neck stretched, then he's going to be infamous. Anyways, they're talking about forced vaccinations, and if you don't have proof of vaccination, then you may not be able to enter into any government buildings. And they were talking about that very logically and very systematically here a couple years ago, and they certainly gone off of that paradigm. And but in a situation like that, I could see how it could become the mark of the beast. It's not a big leap from government buildings to commercial buildings like stores and malls. Anyways, that stuff is all, history. I mean, they're not messing with that stuff anymore. And I don't think they're even going to try, quite frankly. People are waking up. Check out my other videos: Bankster Thieves playlist, Roman Cult playlist, Bankrupt Corporate So-Called Governments, Bar Members 1 through 8, Do-It-Yourself How Not to Volunteer for the Selective Service in the Draft, Martial Law is Here, Do-It-Yourself No Income Tax, Free Mail, Do-It-Yourself Kangaroo Courts 1 through 30, Canada Border Pigs playlist, Bar Members and Their Satanic Connections playlist. So this is the concessions to the pimp. Well, I meant the Pope. No, I meant the pimp. This is 1213. King John signed it. We will and establish. Look it up online if you don't believe it. Then just do a concessions to the Pope. You'll find it. We will and establish perpetual obligation and concession. We will establish that from the proper and special revenues of our aforesaid kingdoms, for all the service and customs which we ought to render for them, saying in all things a penny of St. Peter, the Roman Church shall receive yearly 1,000 marks sterling, namely at the feast of St. Michael 500 marks, and at Easter 500 marks. 700 namely for the kingdom of England, and 300 for the kingdom of Ireland. Okay, and there's actually, there's stuff missing. I left stuff out. That's what those dots are there for. If you want to read the whole thing, knock yourself out. After the concessions of England to the pimp, well, I meant the Pope, No, I meant the pimp. Was signed King John. King John had to make money to pay his tribute. King John imposed martial law rule and started to do things to raise money to pay his tribute. It took only 2 years for the people to figure out what was happening, and the Magna Carta was the result. This is a Quebec court case, so I'd say it's a pretty good authority. The Magna Carta is not a unilateral act emanating solely from the spontaneous will of the king, as the charters of the predecessors of John. Neither is it a treaty, for we cannot say it was concluded between two legitimate and independent sovereignties, nor between two nations, nor is it a law. The barons do not appear in it as subjects, for they are freed from their promise of fidelity, and the king, brought captive, placed before them, submitted to the conditions which the conquerors imposed upon him. Magna Carta is therefore a contract, but resembles a treaty concluded between two nations, in that one of the parties, in virtue of the law of war, can impose its will upon the other. And that's Perlman versus Pichet, and Attorney General of Canada, intervenant, reference habeas corpus, a Quebec court case. A bankruptcy and military occupation after the concessions to the Pope precipitated the Magna Carta. A bankruptcy and military occupation in colonial days precipitated the War of Independence. Yielding and paying yearly to us, our heirs and successors, for the same the yearly rent of 20 marks of lawful money of England at the Feast of All Saints yearly forever, and the first payment thereof to begin and be made on the Feast of All Saints, which shall be in the year of our Lord 1665. And also the fourth part of all gold and silver ore, which shall, within the limits aforesaid, shall from time to time happen to be found. Quarter of all gold and silver. And that's the Carolina Charter. You know, I don't know if anybody's ever seen the map of the Carolina Charter, but it actually goes from coast to coast all across the continent. I mean, damn. Anyways, that was the Carolina Charter, 1663. This is the cause and necessities for taking up arms. Oops. There we go. 1775. Statutes have been passed extending the course of admiralty and vice-admiralty far beyond their ancient limits, for depriving us of the accustomed and inestimable privilege of trial by jury. In cases affecting both life and property, to supersede the course of common law instead thereof, to publish and order the use and exercise of the law martial. So martial law supersedes and replaces common law, but that's only in the corporations. As long as the people are aware and the people just assert their rights, common law is there. Okay? There's two jurisdictions. And for altering fundamentally the form of government established by charter, we saw the misery to which such dictatorship, despotism, that's a dictatorship, folks, would reduce us. If a man be found stealing any of his brethren of the children of Israel, and maketh merchandise of him, or selleth him, then that thief shall die. If we were Christians, we wouldn't be putting up with this stuff. We'd be stretching their necks, okay? Because that's, if you read in Deuteronomy, it says they're supposed to be hung on a tree. And you're supposed to take them down by the end of the day. You can't have them up there overnight. You got to take them down. And so, if we were Christians. Anyways, don't get me going. You're going to get me going here. Whereas taxation, this is George III, chapter 12, 1778. 2 years after the Declaration of Independence. Whereas taxation by the Parliament of Great Britain for the purpose of raising a revenue on His Majesty's colonies, provinces, and plantations in North America has been found by experience to occasion great uneasiness and disorders. Well, no shit, Batman. And it's all about business, right? It's just a bunch of pirates wanting to do business. The bunch of thieves and pirates just doing business. that from and after the passing of this act, the King and Parliament of Great Britain will not impose any duty, tax, assessment, whatever, payable in any of the colonies, provinces, or plantations in North America or the West Indies, except only such duties as may be expedient to impose for the regulation of commerce. You know, we went and did a treaty of peace, 1783, 1773, 1770.
1783.
1783, right. Anyways, and they just turn around and they regroup and then they come back again. Okay, so my attitude, they better hope I never get into a position of power, because there ain't going to be no treaties of peace. Okay, we're going to stretch their neck. We're going to be flaying them. We're going to be, and there's going to be no treaty of peace. Okay, we had a chance to have a treaty of peace and they ignored it, and they just used it as a chance to regroup. There'll be no treaties of peace. They hope to hell that I don't ever get in a position of power. Copies of these documents can be found on my website and linked under my recent videos. For a complete set of YouTube videos with private information shares, a DVD with over 100 searchable law dictionaries and other books and forums, contact me privately at engineerwin@yahoo.com. Donations to support this work are appreciated. I prefer gold or silver coin, but as an extremely less desirable alternative, I can accept the IOUs, the Federal Reserve notes, the forced loans, the securities, the cash app gifts, the checks, the money orders. Send me an email for particulars. Taxes cause the War of Independence. If they can tax you, then you are their slave. You're forced to work for them for nothing. That's one of the felonies that I accuse them of. Involuntary servitude. They're forcing me to work for them for nothing. It's becoming more and more difficult to be free. Felonies mean nothing unless they have a political agenda, but I still accuse them of it. And there's ways that you can get them, I'm telling you. Especially in Texas. Texas is kind of useful that way, where they have to issue a warrant once you get that criminal complaint in their hands. And once you file it into the case, then that judge has got it. Tax is an impost, a tribute imposed on the subject. An excise, a tallage in public law. Taxation signifies the system for raising money for public purposes by compelling the payment by individuals of sums of money called taxes. Some general principles of taxation have been said to be: 1, the subjects of every state ought to contribute to the support of the government as nearly as possible in proportion to their respective abilities, that is, in proportion to the revenue which they respectively enjoy under the protection of the state. Revenue, okay? Revenue. Think about it, folks. Revenue. That's corporate. In the observation or neglect of this maxim consists of what is called equality or inequality of taxation. And the dictionary, this is the Dictionary of English Law, Sweet and Maxwell, London, 1959. So, this is the seeds of the first bankruptcy. Declaration of Rights, 1776, North Carolina, and provided further that nothing herein shall affect the titles and possessions of individuals holding or claiming under the laws heretofore enforced or grants heretofore made by the late King George II and his predecessors, or the late lords, proprietors, or any of them. So they're setting up the first bankruptcy. And this is a treaty between the king and the 13 colonies of the United States of North America, signed in Versailles, July 16th, 1782. Article 1. It's agreed and certified that the sums advanced by His Majesty to the Congress of the United States under the title of a loan for the years 1778, 1779, 1780, 1781, and the present 1782 amount to the sum of 18 million livres, money of France, according to the following 21 receipts of the above-mentioned underwritten minister of Congress, given in virtue of his powers, to wit. Okay, and so the next several slides are going to be taken from the same source, Treaties and Other International Acts of the United States of America, edited by Hunter Miller, Volume 2, Documents 1 through 40, 1776 to 1818, Washington Government Printing Office, 1931. So I'm not going to quote the source again, okay? But it'll be there if you want to look at it in the slide. But so I'm just going to read the text of the treaty. 28th of February, 1778, $750,000. Or livres, actually, I guess, whatever that is. It's 19th of May, 1778, 750,000. 3rd of August, 1778, 750,000. So they were getting shipments, looks like about February, May, August, November. 1st of November, 1778, 750,000, total of 3 million. 10th of June, 1779. So this is what they were using to finance the War of Independence, folks. 250,000. 16th of September, 1779, 250,000. This must be a typo.
So was that King George?
I'll get there.
Oh, okay.
4th of October, 1779, 250,000. 21st of December, 1779, 250,000. So in 1779 is a total of 1 mil. 1778 is 3 mil. 1779 is 1 mil. 29th of February, 1780, 750,000. 23rd of May, 1780, 750,000. Damn. 21st of June, 750,000. 5th of October, 750,000. 27th of November, 1 mil, for a total of 4 mil. So that's 1780. 1781, 15th of February, 750,000. 15th of May, 750,000. 15th of August, 750,000. Well, that's 81. Oh, another one on the 1st of August, a mil. Well, that's interesting. And then on the 15th of November, 750,000 for a total of a mil. 4 mil. Total of 4 mil. And then 1782, 10th of April, 1.5 mil. 1st of July, 1.5 mil. And the 5th of the same month, yeah, right, of July, I guess, 3 mil. For a total of 6 mil in 1782. So that means 18 mil, so there's 6 mil, and 4 is 10 mil. 14, 15, 16, 17, 18 mil, right. So most of it was spent at the very end. I guess that would make sense. It gets the most, any warfare gets the most expensive towards the end, amounting to the whole to 18 millions, by which receipts the said minister has promised in the name of Congress and on behalf of the 13 United States to cause to be paid and reimbursed to the Royal Treasury of His Majesty on the 1st of January, 1788. So that's 6 years later. At the house of his grand banker at Paris, the said sum 18 millions, money of France, with interest at 5% per annum. So, and that's the same, the treaties and other international acts of the United States. So that's the first bankruptcy. This is a court case in Terrett versus Taylor. It's stated that the dissolution of the regal government no more destroyed the rights of the church to possess and enjoy the property which belonged to it than it did the right of any other corporation or individual to his or its own property. In the later case, the Chief Justice, in reference to the corporation of the college, observes that it is too clear to require the support of argument that all contracts and rights respecting property remain unchanged by the Revolution, and the same sentiment was enforced more at length by the other judge who noticed this point in the cause. So again, warfare, or the dissolution of a government, doesn't affect contracts. This is the definitive Treaty of Peace of 1783. And September 30th, 1783. And if you notice here, it having pleased the highlighted stuff. The divine providence to dispose the hearts of the most serene and most potent Prince George III, by the grace of God, King of Great Britain, France, and Ireland. Okay, so he was King of England and France. And so he financed both sides of the War of Independence.
Could you continue reading there where he says the United States of America and explain that? Third line, I believe.
Yeah, let me get there. So I was reading, where was I?
France, you said.
King of England, Ireland, and France, King of Great Britain, France, and Ireland, Defender of the Faith, Duke of Brunswick and Lunenburg, Arch-Treasurer and Prince-Elector of the Holy Roman Empire and of the United States of America. Well, the only thing I can say is it's not the United States of America. It's the United States of America, okay, which is a difference. So I'm going to go into that a little more detail in a minute. It's agreed that the creditors on each side shall meet with no lawful impediment to the recovery of the full value of sterling money of all bona fide debts heretofore contracted, and there shall be a firm and perpetual peace. Well, he's a liar. That's why I say there'd be no peace. You had a chance to have peace. There's no peace. There'll be peace when you're dead. Yeah, there'll be peace when you're dead. Finance both sides, King of France and England. I guess at the time it was Great Britain. France, he financed both sides of the War of Independence. United States owed France 18 million livres from the war. Arch-Treasurer and Prince-Elector of the Holy Roman Empire and the United States of America. So there was a separate entity. If you read the Articles of Confederation, it says the style of this confederacy shall be the United States of America. And so there's two separate entities. And so this entity, and if you read in the statutes at large, it's all United States of America. Queen Elizabeth is now Arch-Treasurer, actually King Charles. Since the bitch is dead, good riddance. King Charles is now Arch-Treasurer and Prince-Elector of the Holy Roman Empire and the United States of America, although I think he's looking at checking out. I think that they're going to ease him out of there. I think that's what's going to happen. You know, they're saying he's got cancer. I think they're going to ease him out of there. I think they're setting it up for his son. There's two ways to conquer and enslave a nation. One is by sword, the other is by debt. Now, this is the second bankruptcy, but they say that international bankruptcy lasts for 70 years, which puts it to the Civil War, which is why they had to put the government into bankruptcy again. The bankster thieves did. And so they say that there was another bankruptcy that happened during the Civil War. I don't know. These are the ones that I can prove. I don't know about the rest of them. There could have been. I'm not saying there's not. There very well could have been. So I'm not sure. Maybe I'll change that to another bankruptcy instead of the second one, because we don't know that it was the second one. On Christmas Eve, 24th of December, 1913, in the middle of the night, Congress passed the Federal Reserve Act, setting up the scenario for the next bankruptcy. In the And in less than 20 years, the Federal Reserve bankers set it up. Within 20 years, this country is going to rule the world. Kings and emperors will soon pass away, and the democracy of the United States will take their place. When the United States rules the world, the Catholic Church will rule the world. And that's Roman Catholic Archbishop James E. Quigley, Chicago Daily Tribune, May 5th, 1903. He wasn't that far off, but he wasn't. It was actually about 25 years, 28 years, 1932. So that's 30 years. But this shows the real party in interest is the Roman cult.
Maybe the Federal Reserve Act was when that happened, 1913.
Maybe. Since March 9th, 1933, the United States has been a state of declared national emergency. Under the power delegated by these statutes, the president may seize property, organize and control the means of production, seize commodities, assign military forces abroad, institute martial law, seize and control all transportation and communication, regulate the operation of all private enterprise, restrict travel in a plethora of particular ways, control the lives of all American citizens. A majority of the people of the United States have lived all their lives under emergency rule. For 40 years, freedoms and governmental procedures guaranteed by the Constitution have in varying degrees been abridged by laws brought into force by states of national emergency. And that's U.S. Senate Report number 93-549, dated November 19th, 1973. So, yeah, 40 years, 1933 and 1973. And this is Congressional Record, March 17th, 1993. It's an established fact that the United States federal government has been dissolved by the Emergency Banking Act, March 9, 1933, 48 Stat 1, Public Law 89-719, declared by President Roosevelt being bankrupt and insolvent. HJR 192, 73rd Congress in session, June 5, 1933. Joint resolution to suspend the gold standard and abrogate the gold clause, dissolve the sovereign authority of the United States and the official capacities of all United States governmental officers, and departments, and is further evidence that the United States federal government exists today in name only. So the Roman cult took over. That's what happened, folks.
So if the previous slide that you had up there was talking about martial law, the president being able to seize this and that, why do we claim that that's not, why does it not affect us? Because we're men on the land and all that's a meaningless exercise on their part? And it applies only to U.S. citizens of the United States?
That's District of Columbia.
Okay.
Right? But
it says there the lives of all American citizens.
I agree.
So that's an incorrect statement.
You're indirectly affected by it.
It says it control.
Huh?
In a plethora of particular ways, control the lives of all American citizens.
Right. They don't want you to know you're under martial law. That's why the War of Independence, think about it, causes and necessities for taking up arms. That's why they took up arms, because you impose martial law. And they don't want you figuring that shit out.
Right. Because
So yes, they have all that power, but they don't necessarily use it. They certainly don't want people to know that's what they're doing. Why do you think they go and, we're going to have a war on terror. We're going to have a war on crime. We're going to have a war on this or a war on that. They're justifying the martial law.
Who was the whatever in bank? Who did we owe the money in bankruptcy? England?
Actually, it's the Vatican,
Vatican?
because it's the International Monetary Fund.
If we defeated them in the World War, How can they collect?
What happened
If you defeat
is
somebody, you own them if you defeat them.
in 1921, the Treasury became the Treasury became the International Monetary Fund in 1921. So this is stuff that's just been systematically happening. Okay, remember, there's a guy by the name of what's his name? He went and visited the Ford Foundation. He testified before the House Committee on Un-American Activities in the 60s. His name was anyways, he testified before the House Committee on Un-American Activities, and he said that the Ford Foundation and the Carnegie Foundation invited him down, and they sat down and talked to him, and they told him everything they were planning on doing. They said they had to get control of the State Department and the educational system, and their purpose was to get a merger between the United States and the Soviet Union. They wanted to have everything to where they could merge them together, and nobody would even notice the difference. And so they wanted to get control of the State Department. Remember, Trump, one of the first things he did is he went and shut down the State Department because he had to get control back, and laid off a bunch of people out of the State Department.
Yeah, especially the higher ups.
Yeah.
Oh,
yeah. And so, so that's what they did, is they got control of the State Department. Norman Dodd. His name was Norman Dodd. There's the Dodd. Do a search online for the Dodd testimony, and he talks about it. How he let's do Dodd testimony.
never heard that one, Glenn. That's a good one.
What's that?
What you're speaking about now. Norman Dodd.
Yeah, Norman Dodd. DODD. Transcript of the Norman, this is supremelaw.org too. It's kind of interesting. That's Supreme Law's, what's his name? Anyways. Let me share it with the audience. Okay, so this is the transcript of the Norman Dodd. This is taken from supremelaw.org, which is okay, so begin the interview is right here. And this is before the House Committee on Un-American Activities. Griffin, Mr. Dodd, let's begin this interview by a brief statement for the record, telling us who you are, what your background is, and your qualifications to speak on the subject. Dodd, well, Mr. Griffin, as for who I am just, as the name implies, an individual born in New Jersey, educated in private schools, eventually in a school called Andover, Massachusetts, and then Yale University. And running through my whole period of being brought up, growing up, I've been an emphatical reader, and I've had one major interest, and that was this country as I was led to believe that it was originally founded. I entered the world of business, knowing absolutely nothing about how that world operates, and I realized that the only way to find out what that world was and consisted of would be to become part of it. And I then acquired some experience in the manufacturing world and in the world of international communications, and finally chose banking as the field I wished to devote my life to. I was fortunate enough to secure a position in one of the important banks in New York. I lived there. I lived through the conditions which led up to what is known as the crash of 1929. I witnessed what is tantamount to a collapse of the structure of the United States as a whole. Much to my surprise, my superiors, in the middle of the panic in which they were immersed, confronted me. I was confronted with the question, Norm, what do we do now? I was 30 at the time, and I had no more right to have an answer to that question than the man in the moon. However, I did manage to say to my superiors, gentlemen, you take this experience as proof of something that you do not know about banking, and you better go find out what that something is and act accordingly. 4 days later, I was confronted by these same superiors with a statement to the effect that, Norm, you go find out, and I really was fool enough to accept that assignment because it meant that you were going to search for something and nobody could tell you what you were looking for. I felt so strongly on the subject that I consented to it. I was relieved of all normal duties inside the bank, and 2.5 years later, I felt that it was possible to report back to those who had given me this assignment. So I rendered such a report, and as a result of the report I rendered, I was told the following. Norm, what you are saying is we should return to sound banking. And I said, yes, in essence, that's exactly what I am saying. Whereupon I got my first shock, which was a statement from them to this effect. We will never see sound banking in the United States again. And they cited chapter and verse to support that statement. What they cited was as follows. Since the end of World War I, we have been responsible for what they call the institutionalizing of conflicting interests, and they are so prevalent inside this country that they can never be resolved. This came to me as an extraordinary shock because the men who made this statement were men who were deemed to be the most prominent bankers in the country. The bank of which I was a part of was spoken of as a Morgan bank. Coming from men of that caliber, a statement of that kind made a tremendous impression on me. That type of impression that it made upon me was this. I wondered if I, as an individual, as what they call a junior officer of the bank, could, with the same enthusiasm, foster the progress and the policies of the bank. I spent about a year trying to think about this out and came to the conclusion that I would have to resign. I did resign. As a consequence of that, I had this experience. When my letter of resignation reached the desk of the president of the bank, he sent for me. I came to visit with him, and he stated to me, Norm, I have your letter, but I do not believe you understand what has happened in the last 10 days. I said, no, sir, Mr. Cochran, I have no idea what's happened. Well, he says, the directors have never been able to get your report to them out of their minds, and as a result, they have decided that you, as an individual, must begin at once, and you must reorganize this bank in keeping with your own ideas. He then said, now can I tear up your letter? And and inasmuch as what I had been said to me, what he was offering me at the age of, by then 33, was about as fine an opportunity for service to the country as I could imagine. I said yes. And they said they wished me to begin at once, and I did. Suddenly, in a span of about 6 weeks, I was not permitted to do another piece of work. And every time I brought the subject up, I was kind of patted on the back and told, stop worrying about it, Norm. Pretty soon you will be a vice president and you will have quite a handsome salary and ultimately be able to return to a very worthwhile pension. And in the meantime, you can play golf and tennis to your heart's content as on weekends. Well, Mr. Griffin, I found I could not do it. I spent a year, figuratively, with my feet on the desk, doing nothing. I just couldn't adjust to it. So I did resign. This time, my resignation stuck. Then I got my second shock, which was the discovery that the doors of every bank in the United States were closed to me, and I never could get a job, as it were, in the bank. So I found myself, for the first time since I graduated from college, out of a job. From then on, I followed various branches of the financial world, ranging from investment counsel to membership in the stock exchange, and I finally ended up as an advisor to a few individuals who had capital funds to look after. In the meantime, my major interest became very specific, which was to endeavor by some means to get the educational world to actually, you might say, teach the subject of economics realistically and move it away from the support of various speculative activities that characterized our country. I have had that interest, and you know how it is. If you generate a specific interest, you find yourself gravitating towards persons with similar interests. Ultimately, I found myself kind of at the center of the world of dissatisfaction with the direction of which this country was headed. And I found myself in contact with many individuals who, on their own, had done a vast amount of studying and research in areas which were part of the problem. Griffin, what point in your career did you become connected with the Reese Committee? Dodd, 1953. Griffin, 1953. And what was that capacity, sir? Dodd, that was in the capacity of what they called Director of Research. Griffin, can you tell us what the Reese Committee was attempting to do? Dodd, yes, I can tell you. It was operating and carry out instructions embodied in the resolution passed by the House of Representatives, which was to investigate the activities of the foundations as to whether or not these activities could justifiably be labeled un-American, without, I might add, defining what they meant by un-American. That was the resolution, and the committee had then the task of selecting a council, and the council in turn had the task of selecting a staff, and he had to have somebody who would direct the work of that staff, and that was what they meant by the Director of Research. Griffin, what were some of the details, the specifics of what you told the committee at that time? Dodd, well, Mr. Griffin, in that report, I specifically, number one, defined what was to us meant the phrase un-American, and we defined that in our way as being a determination to effect change in the country by unconstitutional means. We have plenty of constitutional procedures, assuming that we wish to effect a change in the form of government and that sort of thing, and therefore any effort in that direction which would not avail itself of the procedures authorized by the Constitution would be justifiably called un-American. That, as was the start of educating them up to that particular point, the next thing was to educate them as to the effect on the country as a whole of the activities of large endowed foundations over the then past 40 years. Griffin, what was that effect, sir? Dodd, that effect was to orient our educational system away from support of the principles embodied in the Declaration of Independence and implemented in the Constitution, and to educate them over the idea that the task now was to effect an orientation of education away from these briefly stated principles and self-evident truths, and that what had been the effect of the wealth which constituted the endowments of those foundations that had been in existence over the largest portion of the span of 50 years, and holding them responsible for this change, what we were able to bring forward was, what we had uncovered was the determination of these large endowed foundations through their trustees actually to get control over the content of American education. Griffin, there's quite a bit of publicity given to your conversation with Rowan Gaither. Will you please tell us who he was and what was the conversation you had with him? Dodd. Rowan Gaither was at that time president of the Ford Foundation. Mr. Gaither had sent for me when I found it convenient to be in New York. He asked me to call upon him at his office, which I did. Upon arrival, after a few amenities, Mr. Gaither said, "Mr. Dodd, we have asked you to come up here today because we thought that possibly off the record you would tell us why the Congress is interested in the activities of foundations such as ourselves." And before I could think of how I would reply to that statement, Mr. Gaither then went on and voluntarily stated, "Mr. Dodd, all of us who have had a hand in the making of policies here have had experience either with the OSS during the war or with European economic administration after the war. We have had experience operating under directives. The directives emanate and did emanate from the White House. Now we will operate under just such directives. Would you like to know what the substance of these directives is?" I said, "Yes, Mr. Gaither, I would like very much to know." Whereupon he made this statement to me: "Mr. Dodd, we are here to operate in response to similar directives, the substance of which is that we shall use our grant-making powers so to alter life in the United States that it can be comfortably merged with the Soviet Union." Well, parenthetically, Mr. Griffin, I nearly fell off the chair. I, of course, didn't put my response to Mr. Gaither then was, "Oh, Mr. Gaither, I can now answer your first question. You've forced the Congress of the United States to spend $150,000 to find out what you have just told me." I said, "Of course, legally, you're entitled to make grants for this purpose, but I didn't think you're entitled to withhold this information from the people of this country to whom you're indebted for your tax exemption. So why don't you tell the people of the country just what you told me?" And his answer was, "We would not think of doing any such thing." So then I said, "Well, Mr. Gaither, obviously you forced the Congress to spend this money in order to find out what you just told me." Mr. Griffin, "Mr. Dodd, you have spoken before about some interesting things that were discovered by Catherine Casey at the Carnegie Endowment. Would you tell us that story, please?" Dodd, "Sure. Glad to, Mr. Griffin. This experience you just referred to came about in response to a letter which I had written to the Carnegie Foundation, Carnegie Endowment Center, National Peace, asking certain questions, gathering certain information. On the arrival of that letter, Dr. Johnson, who was then president of the Carnegie Endowment, telephoned me and said, "Did you ever come up to New York?" I said, "Yes, I did, more or less each weekend." And he said, "Then you are here next. When you are here next, here, will you drop in and see us?" Which I did. And again, on arrival at the office of the endowment, I found myself in the presence of Dr. Joseph Johnson, the president, who was the successor to Alger Hiss, two vice presidents and their own counsel, a partner in the firm, a fellow by the name of Cromwell. And Dr. Johnson said, again, after amenities, "Mr. Dodd, we have your letter. We can answer all these questions, but it would be a great deal of trouble. We have a counter suggestion. Our counter suggestion is that if you can spare a member of your staff for 2 weeks and send that member up to New York, we will give that member a room in the library and the minute books of this foundation since its inception, and we think that whatsoever you want to find out or that the Congress wants to find out will be obvious from those minutes." Well, my first reaction was they had lost their minds. I had a pretty good idea of what those minutes would contain, but I realized that Dr. Johnson had only been in office 2 years, and the vice presidents were relatively young men, and counsel also seemed to be a young man. I guess that probably they had never read the minutes themselves. And so I said that I had somebody and I would accept their offer. I went back to Washington and I selected the member of my staff who had been practicing attorney in Washington. She was on my staff to ensure I did not break any congressional procedures or rules. In addition to that, she was unsympathetic to the purpose of the investigation. She was a level-headed and very reasonably brilliant, capable lady, and her attitude towards the investigation was this: what could possibly be wrong with foundations? They do so much good. Okay, so that was side one. I guess that's a I don't know, audio tape or something like that. Well, in the face of that sincere conviction of Catherine's, I went out of my way not to prejudice her in any way, and I did explain to her that she couldn't possibly cover 50 years of handwritten minutes in 2 weeks, so she would have to do what we call spot reading. I blocked out certain periods of time to concentrate on. Off she went to New York, and she came back at the end of 2 weeks with the following recorded on dictaphone belts. We are now at the year 1908, which was the year that the Carnegie Foundation began operations. And in that year, the trustees meeting for the first time raised a specific question, which they discussed throughout the balance of the year, and in a very learned fashion. And the question is this: is there any means known more effective than war, assuming you wish to alter the life of an entire people? And they conclude that to more effective means to that end is known to humanity than war. No more effective means to that end is known to humanity than war. So then in 1909, they raised the second question, and to discuss it, namely, how do we involve the United States in a war? Well, I doubt at that time if there was any subject more removed from the thinking of most of the people of this country than its involvement in a war. There were intermittent shows in the Balkans, but I doubt very much if many people even knew where the Balkans were. And finally, they answered that question as follows: we must control the State Department. And then that very naturally raises the question of how do we do that? They answered by saying we must take over and control the diplomatic machinery of this country. And finally, they resolved to aim at that as an objective. Then time passes and we're eventually in a war, which would be World War I. At that time, they record on their minutes a shocking report to which they dispatched to President Wilson a telegraph cautioning him to see that the war does not end too quickly. And finally, of course, the war is over. At that time, their interest shifts over to preventing what they call a reversion of life in the United States to what was prior to 1914, when World War I broke out. At that point, they came to the conclusion that to prevent a reversion, we must control education in the United States, and they realized that as a pretty big task. To them, it is too big for them alone. So they approached the Rockefeller Foundation with a suggestion that proportion of education could be considered domestic, could be handled by the Rockefeller Foundation, and that portion, which is international, should be handled by the endowment. They then decide that the key to the success of these two operations lay in the alteration of the teaching of American history. So they approach 4 of the then most prominent teachers of American history in the country, people like Charles and Mary Bird. Their suggestion to them is, will they alter the manner in which they present their subject? And they turned down flatly. So they then decide it was necessary for them to do, as they say, in other words, build their own stable of historians. Since they approach the Guggenheim Foundation, then they approach the Guggenheim Foundation, which specializes in fellowship, and say, when we find a young man in the process of studying for doctorates in the field of American history, and we feel that they are the right caliber, will you grant them fellowships on our say-so? And the answer is yes. So under that condition, eventually they assemble 20, and they take these 20 potential teachers of American history to London. There they are briefed in what is expected of them when, as and if they secure appointments in keeping with the doctorate they will have earned. That group of 20 historians ultimately become the nucleus of the American Historical Association, and then towards the end of the 1920s, the endowment grants to them, the American Historical Association, $400,000 for a society of our history in a manner which points to what this country looked forward to in the future. That culminates in a 7-volume study, the last volume of which is, of course, in essence, a summary of the contents of the other 6. The essence of the last volume is this, that the future of this country belongs to collectivism, administered with characteristic American efficiency. That is the story which ultimately grew out of, and of course, was what could have been presented by the members of this congressional committee and the Congress as a whole for just exactly what it said, but they never got to that point. Griffin, this is the story that emerged from the minutes at the Carnegie Foundation. Dodd, that's right. Griffin, and so? Dodd, it was official to that extent. Griffin, and Catherine Casey brought all of these back in the form of dictated notes or verbatim readings of the minutes. Dodd, on dictaphone belts. Griffin, are those in existence today? Dodd, I don't know if they are. They're somewhere in the archives under the control of the Congress, the House of Representatives. Griffin, how many people actually heard those, or were they typed up transcripts made? Dodd, no. How many people actually heard those recordings? Dodd, 3 maybe. Myself, my top assistant, and Catherine. Yeah, I might tell you this experience. As far as its impact on Catherine Casey is concerned, well, she was never able to return to her law practice. If it hadn't been for Carol Reese's ability to tuck her away in a job with the Federal Trade Commission, I don't know what would have happened to Catherine. Ultimately, she lost her mind as a result of it. It was a terrible shock to her. It is a very rough experience for her to encounter proof of this kind. Griffin, Mr. Dodd. Can you summarize the opposition to the committee, the Reese Committee, and particularly the efforts to sabotage the committee? Dodd, well, it began right at the start of the week of the operating staff, Mr. Griffin. It began on the day on which the committee met for the purpose of consenting to or confirming my appointment to the position of Director of Research. Thanks to the abstention by the minority members of the committee for voting, that is, the two Democratic members, that is why technically I was unanimously appointed. I don't know, you want to read the rest of this?
Absolutely.
I mean, you can easily just look it up and read it.
I think.
Okay, I'll read it.
I mean, you're going great, and this is the highlight of my weekend so far.
Well,
I'm going to send this.
I'm surprised you didn't know this stuff.
I'm going to send this to some sovereign people that just got elected to the school board in Ocean City. Sovereign-minded, of course, they're still citizens.
Okay.
No, it's great. I mean, I presume there's other good bombshells.
Well, I'm sure there is. I haven't read the whole thing. I just knew enough about it to know that it was full of all sorts of juicy stuff, eh? It's like really juicy. I mean, the attorney, she went crazy. She couldn't stand it. I
heard it loud and clear.
Anyways.
And it makes complete sense.
Yeah. Okay, let's see where I was at. Okay. Griffin, wasn't the White House involved in opposition? Dodd, not at this particular point, sir. Mr. Reese ordered counsel and myself to visit Wayne Hayes. Wayne Hayes was the ranking minority member of the committee as a Democrat. So we, Catherine and I, had to go down to Mr. Hayes' office, which we did. Mr. Hayes greeted us with the flat statement directed primarily to me. I am opposed to this investigation. I regard it as nothing but an effort on the part of Carol Reese to gain a little prominence. So I'll do everything I can to see that it fails. Well, I have a strange personality in the scene in the sense that a challenge of that nature interests me. Say, our counsel withdrew. He went over and sat on the couch with in Mr. Reese's office and pouted. I sort of took up this statement by Mr. Hayes as a challenge and set myself a goal of winning him over to our point of view. I started by noticing that on his desk there was a book. The book was of the type, and there were many in those days that would be complaining about the spread of communism and Hungary, that type of book. This meant to me, at least Hayes had read the book, so I brought up the subject of the spread of the influence of the Soviet world. For 2 hours, I discussed this with Hayes, and finally he ended up by rising from his desk and saying, Norm, if you will carry this investigation forward, the goal that you have outlined to me, I will be your biggest supporter. I said, Mr. Hayes, I can assure you I will not double-cross you. Subsequently, Mr. Hayes sent word to me that he was in Bethesda Naval Hospital with an attack of ulcers. He asked if I would come and see him, which I did. He then said, Norm, the only reason I asked you to come here is that I just want to hear you say again that you will not double-cross me. I gave him that assurance, and that was the basis of our relationship. Meanwhile, counsel took the attitude expressed in these words, Norm, if you want to waste your time with this guy, as he called him, then you can go ahead and do it, but don't ever ask me to say anything to him under any conditions on any subject. So in a sense, that created a deck for me to operate in relation to Hayes on my own. As time passed, Hayes offered friendship, which I hesitated to accept because of his vulgarity. I didn't want to get mixed up with his socially under any conditions. I didn't want to get mixed up with him socially under any conditions. Well, that was our relationship for about 3 months. Eventually, I had occasion to add to my staff. As a result of adding to my staff a top flight intelligence officer, both the Republican National Committee and the White House resorted to stopping me from continuing this investigation in the direction Carol Reese had personally asked me to do. Mr. Griffin, that direction was to utilize this investigation to uncover the fact that this country had been the victim of a conspiracy. That was Mr. Reese's conviction. I eventually agreed to carry out that direction. I explained to Mr. Reese that his own counsel wouldn't go in that direction. He gave me permission to disregard our own counsel and to set up an aspect of the investigation outside of our office, more or less secretly. The Republican National Committee got wind of what I was doing, and they did everything they could to stop me. They appealed to counsel to stop me. Finally, they resorted to the White House. Griffin, what was their objection? Because of what you were doing, or because of the fact that you were doing it outside of the official auspices of the committee? Dodd, no, the objection was, as they put it, my devotion to what they called anti-Semitism. That was a cooked up idea. In other words, it wasn't true at all, but my way, that's the way they expressed it. Griffin, excuse me, why? Dodd, then they made it stick. Griffin, why did they do that? How could they say that? Well, they could say it, Mr. Griffin, because they had to have something in the way of a rationalization of their decision to do everything they could to stop completion of this investigation, given the direction that it was moving. That direction would have been exposure of this Carnegie Endowment story and the Ford Foundation and the Guggenheim and the Rockefeller Foundation all working in harmony towards the control of education in the United States. Well, to secure the help of the White House in the picture, they got the White House to cause the liaison between the White and the Hill, a major person, to go up to Hayes and try to get him, as it were, actively to oppose what the investigation was engaged in. Hayes then very kindly would listen to this visit from this major person, then would call me and say, Norm, come to my office. I have a good deal to tell you. I would go up. He would tell me he just had a visit from this major person and he wants me to break up this investigation. So then I said, Wayne, what did you do? What did you say to him? He said, I just told him to go get the hell out. And he did that 3 times. I got pretty proud of him in the sense that he was, as it were, backing me up. He finally embarked upon hearing at Hayes' request. Hayes wanted to get them out of the way before he went abroad in the summer. Griffin, why were the hearings finally terminated? What happened to the committee? Dodd, what happened to the committee or to the hearings? What happened? Griffin, the hearings? Dodd, the hearings were terminated. Carol Reese was up against such a furor in Hayes through the activity of our own counsel. Hayes became convinced that he was being double-crossed, and he put on a show in the public hearing room, Mr. Griffith, that was an absolute disgrace. He called Carol Reese publicly every name in the book. Mr. Reese took this as proof that he couldn't continue the hearings. he actually invited me to accompany him when he went down to Hayes' office, and in my presence, with the tears rolling down his face, Hayes apologized to Carol Reese for all he'd done and his conduct. He apologized to me. He thought that that would be enough and Carol would resume. He never did. Griffin, this charge of anti-Semitism is kind of intriguing to me. What was the basis of that charge? Was there any basis for it at all? Dodd, the basis used by the Republican National Committee was that the intelligence officer I had taken on my staff when I oriented this investigation to the exposure of and proof of a conspiracy was known to have a book, and that book was deemed to be anti-Semitic. It was childish, but it's what the second in command at the Republican National Committee said, and he told me I'd have to dismiss this person from my staff. Griffin, who is this person? Dodd, a Colonel Lee Lorraine. Lee Lorraine, Griffin, Lee Lorraine, and that was his book. Do you recall? And what was his book? Dodd, the book they referred to was called Waters Flowing Eastward. It was a very strong castigation of the Jewish influence in the world. Griffin, what were some of the other charges made by Mr. Hayes against Mr. Reese? Dodd, just that Mr. Reese was utilizing his investigation for his own prominence inside the House of Representatives. That was the only charge Hayes could think up. Griffin, how would you describe the motivation of the people who created the foundations and the big foundations in the very beginning? Was their motivation? Dodd, their motivation was, well, let's take Mr. Carnegie as an example. It's almost over.
Mm-hmm. Excellent.
Let's see. His publicly declared and steadfast interest was to counteract the departure of the colonies from Great Britain. He was devoted just to putting the pieces back together again. Griffin, would that have required the collectivism to which they were dedicated? Dodd, no. These policies were the foundations, allegiance to these un-American concepts. These policies were all traceable to the transfer of the funds over into the hands of trustees, Mr. Griffin. Those trustees were not the men who had a hand in the creation of the wealth that led to the endowment or the use of that wealth for that we would call public purposes. Griffin, it was a subversion of the original intent then. Dodd, oh yes, completely so. We got into the worlds traditionally of bankers and lawyers. Griffin, we have the purpose and direction of the major foundations changed over the years up to the present. What are their purposes and directions today? Dodd, 100% behind meeting the post of educating such as it presented through the schools and colleges of this United States on the subject of our history to prove that our original ideas are no longer practical. The future belongs to the collectivistic concepts. There is just no disagreement on this. Griffin, why do the foundations generously support communist causes in the United States? Dodd, well, because to them, communism represents a means of developing what we call a monopoly, as the organization will say, a large-scale industry into an administrable unit. Griffin, do they think that they will? Dodd, they will be the beneficiary of it, yes. And that's the end.
Thanks, Glenn. That was amazing.
So anyways, I would suggest you, that's the Norman Dodd interview. I'm surprised that you guys didn't hear that.
Not one, never. Beautiful. That's going in the archive for sure. And the name of that book, the full title, Waters Flowing Eastward.
Well, no, that was a book that was written that was supposed to have been anti-Semitic. That's all.
Listen to the rest of the title. The war against the kingship of Christ.
Oh, yeah, no doubt. Yeah, no doubt. Yeah,
That was
no
the
doubt.
rest of the title.
Yeah, right. How convenient, eh?
Waters Flowing Eastward.
Yeah, no shit. Let's see what they're saying. David Strait has a site where he explains thoroughly how we get our sovereign citizens and how we're go about claiming it. Yes, I know David, but I disagree with some of the stuff he says. I don't try and capture that minor estate. I think that that's satanic. The Vatican, okay, but I wanted to say, so I can't stick around. Just want to say thank you for providing the information. Okay, well, good. You can always come back and watch the video later if the YouTube doesn't take it down. And if they do, then
We've got it somewhere.
well, damn, I forgot to start recording. So hopefully they don't take it down. I'll have to download it from YouTube. Anyways. So take a 2-minute break. I'm surprised you guys didn't know that. Norman Dodd.
If I did, I forgot about it. That's for sure.
Oh, no.
Maybe I wanted to forget about it.
From the very minute this Constitution was written, they've been trying to destroy it. Okay, well, we might as well keep going. Roman conquest. This is the Roman cult. Remember? The Vatican said in 1905, within 20 years, they would have the Catholic Church would rule the world. So this thing's got this red text on here, and that's really hard to read, but I've got it on the next slide. And so we'll move it over to the next slide. We'll start in this corner right here. And what this text says is pointing at this. This is a Roman Achaia military staff. Roman Achaean military staff carried in battle by all Roman commands, planted on all conquered nations. And then this one is pointing at Biden. Okay, that's Biden in 2015, who was vice president at the time. Devout Roman Catholic honorary degree from Jesuit Scranton University. Yeah, right. And then this one is pointing at this right here, these Roman fascists. That's what this text is right here. Roman bundle of rods bound to a weapon, symbolizing subservient under the rule of a single man. And then this is pointing at Biener, who is he was the Speaker of the House at the time. Devout Roman Catholic trained by Jesuits, installed the first Jesuit chaplain to the House. Having a Jesuit chaplain is kind of like having a Satanist as a chaplain. It's kind of interesting. Anyways, when acting to enforce a statute and subsequent amendments to the present day, the judge of municipal court is acting as an administrative officer, not in a judicial capacity. Courts administering and enforcing statutes do not act judicially, but merely ministerially. They're bought and paid for clerks. It's accepted rule not in the state courts, but in the federal courts as well, that when a judge is enforcing administrative law, they're described as mere extensions of the administrative agency for superior reviewing purposes, a bought and paid for clerk. And so you got to understand that they have, that's why you'll sit there when you go in there, you'll say something to the judge will look at the prosecutor, and the prosecutor will say no. So the prosecutors, it's a kangaroo court. Judges have become involved in enforcement of mere statutes, civil or criminal in nature, and otherwise act as mere clerks of the involved agency. Ministerial officers are incompetent to receive grants of judicial power from the legislature. Their acts in attempting to exercise such powers are necessarily nullities. So they don't have authority to do shit. That's the reason they don't have a court seal on the judgments, on the orders. There's nothing. They're nothing but a bunch of thieves. Where there's no jurisdiction, there's no judge. The proceeding is as nothing, such has been the law from the days of Marshal Saya. That's Manning versus Ketchum, which is a federal court case, quoting Bradley versus Fisher, U.S. Supreme Court, which is quoting 10 Coke 68. That's the 1500s. That's Coke, Lord Coke. It's an English jurist. Judge wears military uniform. Judge sits there and plays stupid. If you fail to follow some obscure rule or procedure, they sell you into slavery. Judge is working for the prosecutor. This guy is the guy that's really running the show. Okay, and this guy, he's doing what this guy tells him. Judge works for the state. Prosecutor works for the state. The police or witness works for the state. The vast majority of the disputes that the police initiate on behalf of their employer are also adjudicated by their employer, where the plaintiff, the judge, the antagonist, the police, the only witness, also the police, all represent the same party. And since no corpus delicti, mens reus or ex reus, can be produced, doesn't technically qualify to be heard according to its own laws. The state, therefore, is indistinguishable from a criminal cartel. They're nothing but a bunch of thieves. Neither involuntary servitude, neither slavery nor involuntary servitude. This is the current fake 13th Amendment. Neither slavery nor involuntary servitude, except for the punishment for crime where the party shall have been duly convicted in their kangaroo court, shall exist in the United States or any place subject to their jurisdiction. He, the prisoner, has as a consequence of his crime not only forfeited his liberty, but all his personal rights except those which the law and its humanity affords him. He is for the time being a slave of the state. They sell you into slavery. Remember, if we were a Christian nation, we'd be stretching their neck, okay? So all you people out there who think you're Christians, you're not Christians, you're Satanists. Till I see people getting their necks stretched for doing this shit, you're still Satanists. And Judgment Day's coming. Who's really to blame? After all, there are over 7 billion of you and just a handful of us. They want you dead, okay? That's the whole purpose of all of this, is they want you dead. Okay? That's this so-called Great Reset. They want you dead. Okay? Think about it. It's said right at the beginning of this. They want you dead. After all, there's over 7 billion of you and a handful of us. Ask yourself, who pulls the triggers? Who drops the bombs? Who pays the taxes? Who borrows the loans? Who buys the myths? Who writes his own? Who shuns his neighbors? Who looks the other way? Who sits around waiting for someone else to do it? Take a close look in the mirror. You might not like what you see. Oh, gee, everything got burned except the passports. 2 planes brought down 3 buildings. They want you dead. The so-called Patriot Act is nothing but a fascist manifesto. Watch my recent video about why the United States is a fascist dictatorship. Fascism is the merger of corporations and state. They even say that fascism is the final stages of capitalism. They want you dead. They want endless wars. They want pandemics. They want forced medical experiments. They want unlawful arrests. They want anarchy and murder. They want chemtrails. They want lethal EMF radiation. They want kangaroo courts. And when you turn up dead, they get to pillage all the fake money in the Roman cult, minor estate, treasury direct account with the International Monetary Fund. It's a win-win-win scenario for them. They want you dead. When you get sick, their sorcerers get to peddle some pharmaceuticals. When you get really sick, their hospitalier sorcerers get to peddle some pharmaceuticals. And maybe they get to butcher you up before you turn up dead. And when you turn up dead, they get to pillage all the fake money in the Roman cult, sesticate, usufruct, minor estate, treasury direct account with the International Monetary Fund. It's a win-win-win scenario for them, no matter what happens. They want you dead. Just look at us. Everything is backwards. Everything is upside down. Doctors destroy health. Lawyers destroy justice. Universities destroy knowledge. Governments destroy freedom. The major media destroys information. And religion destroys spirituality. Hey, there's my kind of girl. I like her equipment. I like her, too. Nice figure. United States is third in murders throughout the world. If you remove Chicago, Detroit, Washington, D.C., St. Louis, and New Orleans, United States is then 189th out of 193 countries in the entire world. Oh, by the way, all 5 cities have strict gun control laws. Gun control is being able to control your gun. They want you dead. War is when your government tells you who the enemy is. Revolution's when you figure it out for yourself. They want you dead. The original assault rifle, 1774, banned from import. 1775, British attempt confiscation. 1776, revolution. They want you dead. When liberty and freedom are at stake, your silence isn't golden, it's yellow. The Great Reset scam. It's nothing but a scam, in my opinion. Of course, and there's rumors. There's lots of rumors. You're always going to hear rumors. According to the rumors I'm hearing, it'll come out that 13 out of 14 T-bills are a fraud. Why is that important? Well, if you listen to Jim Rickards says that all the derivatives on the planet, they have to have T-bills as collateral. So if 13 out of 14 T-bills turn out to be a fraudulent, remember what happened when Silicon Valley Bank went down? What happened is that their T-bills that they were keeping as collateral, one of the things, were only worth 85 cents on the dollar. So that made their balance sheet look bad and they had to go bankrupt. That was one of the contributing factors. What will happen when the U.S. dollar, when that happens, the U.S. dollar will be equal to the Chinese yuan. Right now, it's about 6 Chinese yuan to the US dollar, or 1 Chinese yuan is about 18 cents US dollars. If this happens, imports will go up by about 600%. So your Iraqi dinars will be worth a lot more. They'll be worth 6 times more probably, but everything you buy that's imported, which is everything, will go up by 600%. So I hope you got more than just that putting it away. I think it's a scam, quite frankly. Also, most countries recall their currencies. So think about this. They do it in Europe. They do it all over, all the time. U.S. is the only country that's never recalled their currency. They did it in England recently. They did it in Europe, where they basically announced that after this day, your currency will be worthless, and you have to come in and trade it in for this other currency. And they do that all the time. And if you don't trade it in, after that day, it's worthless. And so I don't know how long you've had your Iraqi dinars or your Vietnamese dong or your whatever that you've got that you're expecting to go up. It might be worthless already. You don't know if it's been replaced. I've got some, and I probably shouldn't have done it, But I got to tell you, I got some, but I'm not getting any more. I can guarantee you that. They want you dead. I didn't say it would be easy, but I said it would be the truth. They want you dead. So that's the end of that one. Any questions online? Spiritual wickedness in high places. You got that right. Any questions here?
No. Not at this point.
Well, we can go through criminal complaints a little bit. So that was the Norman Dodd testimony. Let's so what I do see, this is where I did We the People.
That was recent, right?
Yeah. There's a file stamp on it.
March.
So this is We the People. This is where I added We the People responding in there. And this is file stamped. This is one that I went and filed because I didn't want her to go down there. She got them signed and she delivered them to me, and then I filed them. Bree Kimball is a bar member and a paralegal. So with the criminal complaints, I just, anybody and everybody I can get a name for. Okay, but the bar members are especially important. And a paralegal, I mean, I would say they're deemed to know the law. But if it's a bar member, then there's even a court citation. I'll put in a couple court citations there. But anyways, so this one's filed on the 28th of March. And this is Texas Penal Code, official oppression. The minor estate, assaulting her with that minor estate, which is color of law by definition. Under the Commerce Clause, Article 1, Section 8, Clause 3, with a plenary dictatorship, outside, not exceeding 10 miles square, in violation of Article 1, Section 8, Clause 17. No corporation has standing to say anything to any man or woman. And Kane Russell, that's a law firm.
Could I file official oppression at this point for the Summers Point?
That's official oppression is a Texas. If you were in Texas, you could. You have to find a New Jersey one if you want to use the New Jersey one. This is Texas. A court of general jurisdiction becomes an inferior court of limited jurisdiction when dealing with a statute and when they're in derogation of common law. So I just go through and tell a story and use some citations.
Right. Yeah, this, I mean, other than the name of the crime, because I'm not sure that there is one in New Jersey similar.
You just have to get to know your New Jersey statutes. I found that New Jersey stuff was very hard to find anything.
They hide them like unbelievable.
Yeah, no shit.
It's a criminal enterprise.
Yeah.
Run by the Vatican.
I agree.
And I'm planning on maybe having to sue the Pope. That's where I'm at.
Well, I think that you're better off going into federal court. See, this is where she signed it. She did it in black ink. I wouldn't have done that, but anyways. We'll see if I can find another one that's right. This is federal. Conspiracy. So, we the people again.
Do you file federal,
respondent in error?
Do you file a federal? That's a federal crime.
Yeah, Dallas County.
So you
Federal court. Well, there's only one court in New Jersey, right? Federal court. So you don't have a southern district like you do in some states.
I see. So basically, you filed, even though it was they violated a Texas penal code, that was filed into the district court.
That's a Texas court that's being filed into.
Oh, it's called district. Okay.
That's not a federal court.
Right, but this
14th district.
Right, but this crime, conspiracy, that is a.
Well, so the FBI gets a copy.
Right, but you put a federal.
That's not federal.
It's not.
That's 14th district. That's
No, the conspiracy to threaten, coerce, intimidate.
Yeah, that's a federal crime.
Right, but you filed it into the state case.
Of course.
Right, that's what I'm saying. It's not just state crimes.
Yeah. So I just go through and tell a story. Conspiracy. And it's basically all the same arguments. And she went and did this. I sent her the Word files, and she's actually pretty sharp about that stuff.
Yeah, I'm liking it. I thought it was, it's good.
It's not that difficult.
No.
There's 27. Let's do Brian Stork. He's a lawyer. And that's enticement into slavery and involuntary servitude. All lawyers are deemed to know the law for sure. I didn't put the citation here, but I should have with the lawyer. Whoever kidnaps or carry away any person with the intent to be sold into involuntary servitude or held as a slave, and sale into involuntary servitude, knowingly, willfully holds involuntary servitude or sells anyone into a condition of involuntary servitude, and then because he's assaulting with their minor estate with the objective of responding the Commerce Clause, and all corporations are property, and a slave is property and forced to work for nothing. And I think this has just got the, I'm not sure if there was attachments to this or not. Nope, there's not. Stork has demonstrated his intent to engage in aggravated identity theft and other felonies. He intends to engage in genocide against state nationals because U.S. citizens failed to exist when the Constitution was written, by subjecting the group to conditions of life that are intended to cause the physical destruction of the group in whole or in part, and by transferring by force children of the group to another group. So she is a single mom, and falsely accused the respondent there of being a U.S. citizen slave corporation when there's no such thing, in violation of the Code of Law for 18 U.S.C. Section 911, false personation. Mail fraud, sending mail to and sending threats through the mail, 876, 18 U.S.C. 876, subjecting her to this satanic religious ceremony in violation of 18 U.S.C. Section 247. False and fictitious records, 18 U.S.C. 2073. There's a bunch of felonies. I list all these felonies in here. And they're using their as evidence that they want to enslave her, right? Capitis diminutio maxima means a complete loss of status. It's all block capital letters. This is proof of Stork's intent to enslave the respondent in error, and Stork's bought and paid for clerks selling their justice and their inferior court of limited jurisdiction are using the Roman cult minor estate to sell the respondent area into involuntary servitude in violation of Stork's Code of Law for the District of Columbia, 18 U.S.C. Section 1584. They're engaged in a seditious conspiracy. Right here. This is where I have the one that we talked about earlier. She's one of the people. This proposition may be pronounced as self-evident. The sovereignty of a state extends to everything which exists by its own authority or is introduced by its permission. But does it extend to those means which are employed by Congress to carry into execution powers conferred on that body by the people of the United States? We think it demonstrable that it does not. Those powers are not given by the people of a single state. They're given by the people of the United States to a government whose laws made in pursuance of the Constitution are declared to be supreme.
If we were under common law in New Jersey or Pennsylvania or Texas, it wouldn't. The Congress wouldn't have reach.
That's right.
It's because of the martial law situation.
That's right. Because of the pirates, inland piracy. They're in Gulls, and I'd accuse them of inland piracy.
Yeah, there's a whole list. We need a checklist to go down so we have it all like a check. Like no, I'm saying, Glenn, I'm not kidding. I don't kid generally.
The thing is,
in order to help us, if you, as you,
that's what I do.
no, let me just finish my statement.
Okay.
Wouldn't it be cool to have like a hyperlink of each of the crimes that you have available, that, okay, each time somebody attacks one of the sovereigns, that's available to say this happened, this happened, this happened, this happened, because just as a one-liner, like that makes, to have it in one, as we build this one page or 2-page list of all the possible crimes, because the crime against the child.
The thing is that
it'll make it easier for you too to go down and say, whenever you are advising someone or helping someone, you could say, okay, these are the first 10 that jump out, and a lot of them are the same. But in this case, that one woman, it wouldn't help me with the child situation.
Here you go.
Single mother.
They're right here. There's your list.
Yeah, I know, but okay. All right. What was it, 42 or 18?
18 USC.
And that's all of them?
Well, those are the crimes that are felonies under the criminal code. Now, there's other ones too, and so those ones would be good to have as references. But otherwise, you just go down this list.
Yeah, yes, but as I believe, correct me if I'm wrong, but as you have studied, certain ones pop up to you over and over.
Piracy and privateering. Receipt of pirate property. I've accused them of that.
Robbery ashore is the inland piracy.
Sorry?
The last one is the inland piracy. It's called robbery ashore.
Yeah.
Whoever be engaged in any piratical cruise or enterprise, or being a crew, lands from such vessel, they get out of their car, their vessel, and get onto the land.
That's right.
And they commit robbery ashore, is a pirate and shall be imprisoned for life. There it is.
Right.
1948. Hasn't been updated, I don't believe.
18 USC 1661.
I'm going to stamp that in my brain. 1661. 1661. Because I have all of the cops that are involved on that one. So that's it. I got a lot of work to do.
But there's also receipt of pirated property, or corruption of seamen confederating with pirates.
I had gone through them all, and the only one that really made sense to me was the last one.
Whoever attempts to corrupt any commander, master, or officer, or mariner to yield up or run away with any vessel or goods.
Are we the commander or the master?
It could be.
I mean, but that's you have to explain that.
Yeah, I know, you'd have to justify it. Citizens as pirates, piracy under the law of nations. Whoever on the high seas commits the crime of piracy as defined by the law of nations and is afterwards brought into or found in the United States shall be imprisoned for life.
I claim that this is not the high seas.
I would call it the high seas of commerce, interstate commerce. And they all have to be citizens. There we go. Whoever, being a citizen of the United States, or all commits any act of hostility against any citizen thereof, state, national, under the color of any commission from any or on pretense of authority from any person.
And a person could
the
be
chief of police,
Let's do it. Let me raise some funds. I have to concentrate myself because it's tough. You do an amazing job.
Well, I do it all the time, but a lot of times I come up with stuff after the fact and think I need to add this one. The stuff with the banksters I'm doing right now is more, but I'm also got the speeding ticket or this warning that I got to deal with. And anyways, peonage, slavery, trafficking in persons.
Yeah, you did that one. You did put on.
Oh, and here's the one for passports.
Okay.
Safe conduct violation. Whoever violates any safe conduct or passport duly obtained and issued under authority of the United States shall be fined under this title or imprisoned not more than 10 years or both. That means that cop stops you and he does anything but let you go on your way, then he's violated it.
Are we still live?
Yes, we are.
Okay. I want to tell a story. I watched a quick video of a cop in Miami area, a white cop who stopped a black man, and the black man was pulling a sovereignty game, and the cop said to him, "Do you have a passport?" The man said no, and the white cop smashed his window immediately. Just so you know.
Yeah, no doubt. If he had a passport, the cop would have said,
Exactly.
no shit. That's a violation of a safe conduct or passport. Safe conduct violation. 18 U.S.C. 1545. I'm telling you.
We're starting to have some fun here. Let's launch those.
That's why if you use a passport,
yeah,
and you give it to the cops, that's a problem for them.
Right, and if they know that, they've probably been told that that's.
And the cop said, "Do you have a passport?"
Literally.
Yeah. And the guy said no. Major mistake.
Within 2 to 3 seconds, the guy smashed his window.
Yeah. I got to get a new passport here. I've been waiting. I got to wait for 10 years, and so it'll be this year. By the end of this year, I'll get a new passport. Whoever violates any safe conduct or passport duly obtained, issued under authority of the United States, shall be fined or imprisoned not more than 10 years or both. I mean, that's anything that violates a passport. Passport is a safe conduct. They're supposed to leave you alone.
The other thing while I was in the hotel, as I was studying maritime and admiralty jurisdiction, it occurred to me that the reason that if I was coming over from England on a ship and I got to the wharf, before I get onto the land, what do we have to do when we arrive in the country or the air? Off a plane, we hand them the passport.
Yeah, no, yeah.
It's to pass the port.
Right.
So they're under the presumption that we are on the high seas, where the tide ebbs and flows, or the high seas. We're not on land. We defeat their presumption when we give them the passport.
Well, they can make whatever presumption they want.
No, but the passport is the reason why the passport, it says it right in the name. We're passing the port onto the land.
Well,
we didn't need it when we were under common law. And we can claim common law all day long, but because of the martial law rule, the passport is what establishes us as men on the land, in my view. That's their legal game that they play. And it was proven out by what the cop did to that guy.
Yep. So, anyways,
It was a great session today.
this is a good one. Safe conduct violation.
I'm psyched. It's going to be great, and I think what would be helpful. You know how you do the we can do the hyperlink in a document.
I suppose I don't like doing them. Why?
Oh, you don't?
No, why?
I do, because when you hit the hyperlink, it automatically goes to it, so that when one is reading this, it would really go well, I believe, on your site somewhere, where here's a list of all the crimes that we have. For example, you filed so many 18 USCs, but if you would have them in numerical order listed.
I don't know. I have to think about it. I mean, I don't do my website. I hire somebody, and so if I have to put that shit up, then I got to pay him to do it.
I'm just saying, is it, even if you,
I mean, I have people that contact me all the time saying, we can give you more visibility on your website and all the rest of this crap. And my website is just fine the way it is. I mean, you know, if you want to make a website and you want to link stuff like that, knock yourself out. I'll have to think about how I want to do that, but you know, I'll think about it. That's all I can tell you.
it may actually help. That's fine. And it may actually help whenever you're helping someone else to just be able to have one place where all of the common ones you use, because you use your memory a lot, I think.
Yeah, there's really. I'm just trying to think of where I would. I mean, I put stuff in the show notes of YouTube videos, or I could put a link on Google. I can make a document with hyperlinks and put it on Google, and then have a link to that document in show notes of the YouTube videos or something. That's something to think about.
I'm not recommending that you make it
Well,
a project. I'm just recommending, as you're now just.
You know, you're just trying to make more work for me.
Wait a minute. No, I'm actually trying to make all of us more successful by virtue of the fact that as you next week, will you not be going through and referring to these in your work? Yes. Okay. So, all right, I already got that one. But the next time you see one you don't have in, it takes just a few. I've done this myself, not for this, but other things.
Yeah.
And
Just say start with
one.
Involuntary solitude. That's it. And here's what he's saying. Anybody contact you, you just go, here's the link.
Right.
And you can charge them $10, $20 for the
No, you
access
can't charge
or
them
whatever.
shit. They're not going to pay you.
But it ends.
Oh, I say, well, if
Oh, I believe you. How much did you send me?
300 to 200 for 300 for this.
Yeah, right. Okay.
And
So you're going to start. I
if they weren't
don't see
getting
you
my-
bought. You didn't buy my videos. You didn't buy any of my other stuff.
They're garnishing 2/3 of my retirement, and I can't work. I can't work with
Whatever.
They have us. They have the system has many of us down, and we will prevail. And the question is how to get paid when we. Well, are they paying us or discharging debt? If they were to give us Federal Reserve notes and we translate it into silver, then that is getting paid. So, but no, I mean, I'm frankly.
They fucking rigged the price of silver.
That's true.
Oh yeah,
What isn't rigged?
a third of it's going in for the military stuff. A third of the silver is being used by our military for the war machine.
So, anyways, any questions online? Let's see. Oh, there was this saying in Maine they had a common law trial in 1939.
Right.
Let's do this. And let's do this.
I think I could find that video. I should send it to you. The one with the guy smashing.
This is this criminal complaint that I was working on. So, but once we get these criminal complaints filed into the case, then I'll give her a demand to disqualify the judge, and that'll hurt him. You know, I don't know if he's going to be permanently removed, but if he gets removed, has to recuse himself, then that's a problem. He'll think twice about not issuing warrants next time. You know what I mean?
We have to administer our public servants.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
You know, we can't worry about. We just have to do what's right at the time and trust.
Yeah.
But no, I'm excited about digging into 18 USC on the Cornell site because
Oh, that's so cool.
and there's not that much there, and once you study it, it starts to become.
Well, not only gives you 18, it gives you all the titles. 18 just one of those.
Yeah, but 18 is the.
Title 18 is a federal crime.
That's what I want to know.
But there's how many titles in there? 50, 100? I don't know. There's a lot of titles in there.
Right, but for our purposes.
Well, there's 50.
Right, but for our purposes.
At least 50.
Mm-hmm.
For our purposes, 18 is
18.
critical for starters, foundationally. That's what, to me, that's what got the cop fired, or retired, was Glenn filing the criminal complaints. Now, the problem is, I don't think the bar, I have to, like you said, do the bar complaints copying what you did so they get a second report on the same bar members.
Yep. So, anyways, I think that's about it. I think we're about done. Unless anybody has anything. Do you have any questions online? If anybody wants, I can send Word files for these criminal complaints, and then you can manipulate them. If you want me to review them, then I need a donation. But other than that, I'll send them to you for free, and it'll get you started at least. And there's these lawyers. I think we had 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 criminal complaints against each lawyer, and that was in Texas. So some of them were for Texas crimes, and I think it was just like one of them was Texas crimes. The rest of them were all federal. But so if anybody wants, I'll send that stuff for free. But if you want me to review it, then I need a donation. And I never tell you what the donation should be. I tell you to consider how much of my time you think you're going to need and what you think my time is worth. So I'm not going to tell you what the donation has to be. And if you send me a donation and I wind up spending a lot of time, I'll tell you I'll need more donation. Depends on how big the donation is. If you send me a good donation, then it'll be enough. But, some people sent me $10. And so, I'll just flat out tell them I need more than $10. Know what I mean? Anyways. So anybody have anything, any questions? I'm not seeing any new questions. Yeah, they like to control they like to control everything, quite frankly, and it's going to catch up to them. I think they're losing control right now, but How it all plays out, I have no idea. You know, we're just pawns in the big game of chess. That's why I listen to 107 and Jim Willie, because at least then I get ideas on what's possibly coming. And so then, you know, there's three kinds of people. There's those that make things happen, there's those that watch things happen, and there's those that wonder what happened. So at least we'll be the one that watches it. You know what I mean? Yep, everybody should have babies at home if you can. I always told my wife that that was her department. If she wasn't completely comfortable with it, then, you know, do it in the hospital. I'd support her any way she wanted to do it, because, you know, that's pretty big deal. And so I would never try and coerce her into. So we had 2 of our kids at home, and the rest of them were in the hospital. And so. And you know, I'm a little bit older now, and I would do things a little differently. And I try and help. I put stuff on YouTube and stuff on how to do it. And so I don't know everything. I do the stuff that I know works. There's a lot of unproven theories out there, and you know, so you just can't. You know, a lot of people peddling clickbait, okay, wanting people to, and I've caught some of it, quite frankly. That's why when I was doing the criminal complaints a couple of days ago, those criminal complaints are because I went and did something that somebody said, oh yeah, it's going to work, and they even had someone that it did work. At least they claimed it worked, and so I figured, okay, I'll give it a try. And it didn't work. But it could be I didn't lay the foundations properly. There could be some foundational things that need to be done. A lot of times that's what the case is. So in all fairness to them. But the bottom line is so I don't tell people to do something that I know that I don't know that doesn't work, or that, you know, if there's some foundational things, then I make sure I know what that is and before I tell them what to do. So thanks for watching. I think we're going to end it here pretty quick. And I got to download this video so that I'll have a copy. I forgot to start recording at the very beginning. It's a networking thing. Nobody knows everything. They keep it all secret. They're a bunch of thieves, okay, and they know it, and so they don't want to get caught. So they just, it's all done in secret. That's why it's satanic. It's evil. Okay, well, I guess we're going to cash it in here. Thanks for watching, and we'll be doing another private information share in November in New Jersey. So goodbye from beautiful Ocean City, New Jersey.